Well, hello, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today is author David R. Stokes. We're going to be talking about his book, The Hope Not Plot, a novel of Churchill's final farewell. David, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast.
Great to be with you, Paul. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. I'm really excited about this because I love historical fiction, and this is a historical espionage
Right,
thriller.
right.
Probably the best way to describe it, but we're going to get into all those details in just a moment. For those familiar with the show, we'd like to start things off talking about anything we may have read or watched lately. Did we like it? Did we not like it? We're like, I don't ever want to see that again as long as I live. I'll go first just to give David a little time to collect his thoughts. I knew this was out on Disney/Hulu, so I kind of worked my way through I guess you can't call it a reboot, an update of the King of the Hill animated series. It's only 10 episodes long. It was actually really good. I think they did a great job of having all the characters in the modern world, so to speak, and some really great writing, and I really enjoyed it a lot. And then over the weekend, I decided to just give my brain a rest, so I watched Megan 2.0, which is on Max. I think it's on Max. No, it's on Peacock. My apologies, because I'd already seen the first one. And this one, it's not as much a horror movie as it is more almost like a sci-fi thriller. I think I read one review said this is kind of like if they took Terminator 2 and made it with dolls. So,
There you go. Yeah.
yeah, I can't argue that. It
Yeah.
was very silly. It was very fun. I don't ever need to see it again, but I'm glad I enjoyed it. I'm glad I watched it, and I did enjoy it. It's definitely a popcorn. Watch this at home and leave your brain at the door kind of thing. David, what about you?
Well, I'm not into the obviously cerebral stuff you are, but my wife and I just watched the Netflix, The House of Guinness. Really, really great
Mm.
historical, about the Guinness family and all that stuff back in the 1800s. That was really good. I'm drawn to that kind of stuff. I am also rewatching for classic TV fans all of the original episodes of the television show from the 60s, The Fugitive. So how about that?
Oh wow.
Hmm.
Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the actor's name. I know it's Richard Kimball as the character.
David Jansen.
Oh,
Yeah.
I almost said David Johansen, but I think that's the guy.
Right.
That's the musician who was with the Animals and then
Yeah.
Buster Poindexter.
Yeah.
David Jansen, and I know that. Are you still working your way through it, or have you
Oh,
completed
I've
the?
seen it several times. It's
Okay,
probably, yeah, yeah, but I'm going through it again.
okay, and I know spoiler alert for a show
Yeah.
from the '60s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the finale is the showdown with the one-armed man.
Yeah, it's two parts called The Judgment. Yeah, it
Hmm.
was 1967. I remember watching that as a kid.
Wow.
And so I guess I'm that old. And so yeah, it was fascinating. It still stands up in my opinion.
That's great. That's great. That is really good stuff. And of course, it makes me think of the Harrison Ford movie version,
Which was also very good.
which
Very,
is
very
also
good.
very good. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, David, let's start things. Actually, what I like to do is, again, we're talking about your book, The Hope Not Plot, but what I like to do is I like to read the little bio that's on the back of the book.
Sure.
David R.
Mhm.
Stokes is a ghostwriter, best-selling author, broadcaster, columnist, and retired minister. He's married to Karen Holland Stokes. They live in Virginia near picturesque mountains, idyllic horse farms, and bucolic vineyards. Great writing settings. Please find out more about David's books and his ghostwriting work at www.davidrstokes.com. We will, of course, mention that website at the end of the program. So,
Sure.
David, let's talk a little bit about you as a writer. How did you get your start? I mean, we just went through this great list, ghostwriter, author, columnist. I mean, it looks like you've been a writer for pretty much your entire life.
Well, yeah, writing has always been part of. I was a pastor, a minister for 40 years, and writing was always part of that, a significant part of that, and research and so forth. But I really started working on my first book about 20 years ago, I guess, a narrative nonfiction book that was eventually published in 2010 and 11, and actually became a Wall Street Journal bestseller briefly a couple of times. So yeah, I'm a voracious reader. At one time, I had 7,000 books in my library until retirement. My wife made me divest myself of the great number of those, the lion's share. But yeah, I started out that way, and I wrote columns and essays, and of course, everybody did a blog, and I did that. But really, I love research, and so I dug up a story from the 1920s and went to town with it. It took me 2 or 3 years to put it all together, and I was off and running. And I've done a few novels since then, a couple of screenplays. I've got three or four irons in the fire. I always think of it like the movie The Great Escape, the old classic movie where they were digging three tunnels at the same time, Tom,
Hmm.
Dick, and Harry. And I'm always doing Tom, Dick, and Harry, and then I figure out which one to proceed with and so forth. So it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. I was going to say 1.7 thousand books in your library, and just looking behind you, it looks like you've either restocked your library or these are the ones your wife lets you keep.
No, I still have about 1,500 that she's let me keep, and we still are in negotiations, we, for that. So we'll see how that turns out.
Okay, that is great stuff. So, okay, so I'm very intrigued to hear more about your book, The Hope Not Plot, a novel of Churchill's final farewell. So, what I'd like to ask guests is, can you do like the elevator pitch or the cocktail party pitch? You're there at a social function, and someone says, "Oh, David, what's your new book about?" And you can say,
Well, Winston Churchill, when he died, it was a major world event. I mean, the guy was one of the great icons of the 20th century. And when he died, satellite was just new. People watched millions, 350 million people watched. And all the world leaders gathered there for the funeral. It was a must, visit, except for the newly inaugurated president in his own right, Lyndon Johnson. Why would this media hog president, full of ego, miss the most important funeral just a few days after his own inauguration? Why didn't he send Vice President Humphrey? And what was that about? And so I like to find these little intriguing, why did the dog not bark? The old
hmm.
Sherlock Holmes kind of thing. And then I sort of insert into that this whole theoretical thing. Well, he didn't go because there was chatter about a potential terrorist attack at that particular funeral. And the more he found out about it, the less he wanted to go. He mobilizes some people, sends them across the pond. They go on a search to find out whether it's true. Guess what? It is. And the story is told from there.
Okay, I was going to say that it's not just one specific thing, but I guess the big question is that, so this happened, I believe it was 1965.
Mhm.
And so was that the original planting of the seed in your mind, or was it something that's like you've just kind of been, letting it gestate
Oh,
since
yeah,
then?
I'm a big Churchill fan, buff, and
Okay.
so I followed that. And his funeral, somebody gave me about 15 years ago a copy of Life magazine, the commemorative edition that they did about the funeral, full of pictures and stuff. And so it's a fascinating thing. I mean, the anniversary of it just passed, the 60th anniversary of it just passed, and it really wasn't noticed that much. But when you think of what Queen Elizabeth's funeral, when you think of other major world leaders, this one was more people watched the Churchill funeral than watched the JFK funeral
Hmm.
14 months before that. So and part of that was the evolution, even in that short time, of technology. But it was a world event, and it was quite an amazing thing. And so there's so much, I sort of like, I had one novelist or actually nonfiction writer tell me that when he writes, he sort of dumps his reporter's notebook into the book. And I probably did that to an extent. There are a lot of factoid. There's a lot of history in this book. I mean, obviously,
Hmm.
weave it together with this story, this what if story. But I'm very proud of it from the historical standpoint. I think it stands up for quite well.
Yeah, okay. That actually raises two of the questions that I wrote while I was reading the book. The first one is that reading the book, you can't help but think how much of it is fact and how much of it is fiction and how much of it is the author, in this case you, taking a little creative license with, I guess you'd call it the truth.
Well, all the details about Winston Churchill and all the details about his funeral and the planning for his funeral, which started back in like 13 years before that with Queen Elizabeth when she was first becoming queen. All of that is true. All of that is based on fact. You can ferret that out. All the characters in the book, all the major characters are real, except one character, a primary character, is a composite of a couple of Cold War spies, and I've given him a different name, but people who are really into Cold War espionage can see who
Hmm.
that is pretty clearly. So there's not any minor characters made up. I have rearranged the chess pieces on the board at times. A lot about Lyndon Johnson in this book, interesting little details that I think are fascinating. A lot about Churchill, a lot about the time, a lot about Harold Wilson, who was the prime minister at that time of Great Britain, fairly new at it. Some of the intrigues of British politics, some stuff about MI5, MI6. There's an old spy from the Cold War, notorious name that comes back up and features in the story. His name is Kim Philby.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of stuff like that in the book.
Yeah, I was going to say that that even leads to another question I had that it's a really decent mix of real life characters and
Right.
fictional creations. So I think what I was thinking is how did you determine while you were putting this story together who to use and who to, I guess, make up? Because as you said, we have LBJ as a primary supporting character and Harvey King, who I think in your author notes you said resembles real life spy William King Harvey. So I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
did you have a list of like character, I guess, real life characters? Because you do have an extensive that, but you also have a
No,
lot
I
of the
had
supporting characters.
Yeah, I had the framework, in my head, but it sort of a lot of it developed as I went along. It's like what Stephen King, I think, once said when somebody said, "Why'd you kill so and so off?" He said, "I didn't kill him. I found him dead." And so a lot of that was, I'm sort of coming to the next level and say, "This is a great place to insert." And I didn't have to make up much because there are enough real life characters into this mix. Politicians in Britain, politicians here, uh, known entities from the CIA and from MI5 and from that murky world. I mean, I would say probably 90% of the characters in the book are real. 10% are made up or composite.
Okay, I was going to say, especially like Brogan, because I kept
Yeah,
thinking, is this a
that's a
real per?
that's a made up character.
Okay.
And his other his the woman he becomes involved with and so forth, made up character. But for instance, I bring up one of Churchill's longtime bodyguards. That's a real guy, Mr.
Hmm.
Thompson, and he's in the book. And other people that are in that particular world. The person that was standing guard at Churchill's front door, real person from the real accounts.
And I got to say, this maybe it's showing my age, but the one thing that really, like, to lack of a better phrase, blew my mind is that Bill Moyers was working for LBJ. And
It's so
see, to
funny
me,
because
Bill Moyers was the guy on PBS.
yeah, he was, and he passed away just as this book was being finished and being rolled out. And he was for a long time an aide to President John. He was President Johnson's press secretary for a long time. I tell that story in there of how he showed up in Dallas, had to charter a plane to get to Love Field on November the 22nd when his boss was sworn in. And Moyers was also the same background as me. Started out as a minister
Hmm.
and had seminary and so forth, and it went in a different direction. But yeah, a fascinating character. And the interaction that I described between him and Lyndon Johnson, of course, that's invented, but it's really based on the stuff that I've read, about both of them.
Okay, that raises a great point. Because it is historical fiction, so you want to have as much of it as be as accurate as possible. How
Right.
much research did you have to go into this? Was this years in the making? Was it kind of like just finding factoids as you're looking things up, think, oh, this would be a great detail to include? I mean, there are a lot of little details and touches that are scattered throughout the entire story for all of the different storylines, of which there are many that adds this, it heightens the sense of realism to it.
Yeah, Eric Larson, the great narrative nonfiction writer, said that he calls that part hunting detail. And so you're hunting detail. The fortunate thing about this is not a book I could have written 25 years ago or 30 years ago because I spent that time reading just randomly about these stories, I did. My grad work was on the Cold War. I got involved in Cold War espionage stuff. I wrote for the Cold War Museum for my friend Francis Gary Powers Jr. for a while, and so it's all tied together. And by the time I advanced to the point where I said, "Let me write a book about this, particular what if scenario," all the pieces were there in my mind and in my library in fragments. I just had to find them and assemble them and put them in the blender so that they come out right.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the other things I was thinking while I was reading it, as I mentioned, there's so many different subplots and storylines. How did you map it all out? Did you kind of you had all of this factual information to work with. Did you use that as, I guess, a base or a foundation and just be able to start tying things into it? Or that maybe if you've discovered, oh my gosh, these two characters are actually connected, that would be a great detail to add
Right.
to it.
Well, the spine of the book is Churchill's funeral, his death, his lingering death, and then the plans before that for the funeral, and then all the way to the end to his burial. And so that's the backdrop for the book, and all the stuff about that is true and verifiable. And so pulling it all together was a chronological thing. I had a short window of time to work with because the story really begins when Churchill is a few days before his death, and it goes until the time he is buried and a few days after that. And so you have that little short period of time, and I had to advance the story pretty quickly.
Yeah, I did notice that each chapter, it's the subheading for the chapter listing, it's the date.
Right,
And
exactly.
sometimes I
Those are
want to
real
say
dates for real events, yeah.
exactly that it's all playing out, so to speak, in real time.
Right.
What I thought was also fascinating is because with historical fiction, I guess this is it falls into that category. There's no one specific main character. It's more of a good guys versus the bad guys. Now,
Yes.
was that your intent from the start, or did you want to come up with a? Did you think, oh, maybe I should have like a Jack Ryan type character who's the driving the action, or did you think this is a big ensemble piece, so it can't really focus on one character?
Well, at various points in the book, main characters like Tiernan Brogan later on pops up, Harvey King pops up. But there are so many real characters that stand alone that this is sort of like a gathering of usual suspects, you know. So you sort of have an ensemble of characters, and you have the Cold War divide, you know, the Soviets versus us, and you have, and by the way, the whole stuff about the Soviet plan to take over Europe, all of that stuff was in war plans.
Mhm.
That's all based on fact, as were our countermeasures at the Pentagon. So all of that stuff is there and it's researchable and so forth. And I actually did consult with a couple of Pentagon historians on that.
Okay,
Mhm.
we're going to get to that in just a minute. Did you ever have to go back, excuse me, and like readjust or fine tune a storyline or a subplot because it just wasn't working out, or you just couldn't figure out what to do with it?
Yeah, yeah.
And also, was it a challenge to, as we said, it's a big ensemble cast. Was it a challenge to keep track of everybody, try to like make sure that they were where they were supposed to be
Yeah, that's
at that
exactly
point in
right.
the story?
That's really important because when you write episodically and you come back and you switch things around, you want to make sure you get the timeline right. Was it morning? Was it night? You
Hmm.
know, were they in London? Were they in Washington? That kind of thing. And so that was a challenge, and a lot of that. And there even toward the end, the editorial work had, you know, people that helped me with that, you know, pulled out, oh, this is a plot hole. That guy couldn't have been there at that particular time, and it couldn't have been that time there and that time in Washington. So that was always a challenge. I suppose it is with any writing of that kind.
Or did you ever have to? I don't want to say embellish things, but did you ever kind of feel a little stuck about like how something was supposed to work out, or because of a lot of it was based on factual events that you were able to use that as the basis?
Yeah, the hardest part was the inventive stuff, and especially the thriller chase kind of stuff. That's not, you know, stuff that I write a lot about. I watch it, you know, on television, movies. So
Sure.
that was a bit of a challenge, and you know, I hope I pulled it off, but that was a bit of a challenge.
Did you ever find yourself kind of thinking that, okay, I'm not sure where this is going, and maybe like take a step back and kind of like maybe I kept thinking while you were writing this, you had the big board with all the pictures and the strings connecting all the characters together,
Right,
and
right,
thinking, okay, if this guy meets this guy at the subway station, and
right,
what if this guy is
right,
also
right,
there
right.
at the same time?
Yeah, there were a few things that wound up on the cutting room floor as it is, but not many. Not many. There wasn't a lot of debris. There wasn't a lot of residue left over uh, because it just really flowed together well. And again, with that funeral as the backdrop and the various things happen. The premise is set, then you know you have to sort of make sure everything fits, and I think it did.
No, oh, yeah, yeah. It's a really solid piece of work, and it definitely flows. That raises a great point. Did you ever find yourself maybe thinking, okay, this is too much information or too much detail, or think, I need to expand on this?
No, never do I need to expand on this. If anything, I have to be careful in writing a book like this because narrative nonfiction is more my forte to keep it, you know, the show versus tell, but to make sure the expository passages don't become laborious.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the way to do that is by turning them into dialogue and having people talk about things. And so that was a challenge. Uh, it's very interesting. I've often wondered if you could write historical fiction as so it looks like narrative nonfiction. So when someone's reading the book and saying, you can put fake footnotes in there saying, did this really happen? And so forth. So, but I lean much more to the expository side, and I have to kick myself and be reminded that I'm telling a story. I'm not David McCullough here. I'm telling a story. It's sort of the dynamic between McCullough and you know, Michael Connolly or something.
Sure, sure. You mentioned earlier, I think it was getting input from people at the Pentagon. I was curious the reactions to the book. I mean, I looked on the Amazon page that's reactions from readers, which is always great to see. But I'm very intrigued to know if you heard from anybody who was around during that time, or maybe if you interviewed them at all, just to kind of get a little more detail,
Yeah.
and the reaction from people who may have read the book or they read it and said, "Oh, this is, that's not entirely how it happened."
Yeah, I use some of these as beta readers because I had been a minister for so long. The last 20 years of it was in Fairfax, Virginia, which is just outside D.C. And I was privileged to have in my congregation people from the Pentagon, people from the White House, people from Capitol Hill, and actually people from the Central Intelligence Agency, some well-placed people. So, yeah, I had a lot of people that I could run ideas by and see if this was feasible or not. And because that was important to me that somebody in that business or historically, savvy would say, yeah, that's reads well. That's a true account. I don't want to get, I didn't want to get, I would rather get the chase scenes wrong than
Hmm.
the history wrong, you know.
Sure, sure, that makes sense. So what is next for you? I mean, so you've got this great book again, The Hope Not Plot, about
And,
the novel of Churchill's final farewell. I mean, are you going to stick with historical nonfiction, or do you want to expand to something else?
well, I'm working on a story right now, which is a true story based on the Ford Motor Company. I grew up in Detroit, and Henry Ford had a right-hand man who was sort of his henchman. And the guy's name was Harry Bennett, and there's never been a full-length book, but he was a fascinating character. So I've been doing a lot of research about that over the last few years, and that's more of a narrative nonfiction thing. There are a couple of other fictional things. I'm a ghostwriter, and so I've noodled with a book about a ghostwriter who solves crimes and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of ideas, and I have plenty of ideas to keep me hopping at this point in my life.
Okay, that's great. What a few pieces of advice you would have for writers out there who want to create a story like this? It could be, as a political espionage thriller or narrative nonfiction or historical nonfiction. But are there anything like tips or guidelines that you would strongly suggest writers keep in mind when they're putting together a story of this type?
Well, do your reading and do your research, even before you put anything down on a page. For historical fiction or historical thriller fiction, whatever it might be to work, you have to get those facts correct. Otherwise, a reader's not going to take you serious. So I think that that's the first part, the research. And if a person's not really willing to do that, then they really shouldn't try this genre
Hmm.
at all, or anything in that cluster of genres that you spoke of a moment ago. And just write and rewrite. I mean, I look at stuff I wrote 20 years ago and say, how in the world, you get better at anything you do and pursue and practice makes perfect or permanent and so you do that. There was a book published that came out recently by David McCullough, we mentioned him earlier, by his daughter and some another person called, I think, History Matters. I bought the book, and they found essays that McCullough had written long before he died. And one of the things, McCullough said, it's not hard to write. You just do 200, 4 pages a day, and that's 200. That's about 1,000 words a day. Churchill himself was also a bricklayer. He prided himself, and he was a writer, and his goal was 2,000 words and 2,000 bricks a day. I try to stay somewhere in between that dynamic. Not the bricks, so I
I
can't.
was gonna say, yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great detail. You must have a lot of walls in your
you're
backyard.
right. Well, he did at Chartwell. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say your advice about do your reading and research. It really r rings true for me because I mean my thing is screenplays. I love to write them, but I also love to read them. And I
I
was
do too.
reading a script several years ago, and it starts in the just before the dawn of the 20th century, so like the 1890s, and it's talking about this character who's out on the plains on his horse, and he's so moved to write something down that he reaches into his saddlebag and pulls out a ballpoint pen.
Sure he
And
does, right?
and I said, wait a minute. It's like 1890. When was the ballpoint pen invented? This is like on page three. And
Yeah,
so I looked it up and the ballpoint pen was like 1920 something. It
yeah,
was much later.
yeah.
And that just I hate to say it ruined the rest of the story for me because I was thinking the writer did not get this historical detail true. So how much of the rest of the story can I count? How much could I rely on, or how much am I going to keep thinking, is this right? Is this right? I mean, it really matters.
And it made you, I think, respect the material less because he hadn't done his homework on that. And yeah, that's. I remember I was working on a ghostwriting project, and this guy had written a draft, and I was redoing it, and he had somebody having a cigarette lighter before cigarette lighters, were popular. I said, that couldn't have happened that way. And so, yeah, those are the things the ticking clock. What is it in Shakespeare, Julius Caesar or something? The anachronisms and other things you have to watch out for. That's the research, and that's also having other people in your world, even if you're, not a big name writer with a whole publishing house full of editors standing behind you. They can still get the facts wrong, but it's important to have people in particular areas that are not only good with the semicolon here, comma there, the copy editing part, but also the fact checking and the asking the tough questions. Could this have really happened that way?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just read a friend script recently that takes place in Manhattan, and he has all these amazing things that are happening, and there's nobody else on the sidewalk, and I I just
Yeah.
couldn't believe that part.
Yeah. During COVID, maybe, but that's about it, right?
No,
Yeah.
it's set in the modern age, so to speak.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. David R. Stokes, this has been fantastic. Again, your book is The Hope Not Plot, a novel of Churchill's final farewell. Where can people find this book and find out more about you and your other material?
Well, they can find out the book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any place they buy books or order books. It's available in hardcover, paperback, and also ebook format. No audiobook yet, but we're coming to that. My website's davidrastokes.com. On Facebook, I'm David R. Stokes author, and on X, or formerly known as Twitter, I am at David R. Stokes, so pretty uniform there. But davidrastokes.com is the website, and the book is widely available at Amazon. Just been out for a couple of weeks now.
All right. Well, David R. Stokes, this has been a fantastic and really enjoyable discussion. Again, his book is The Hope Not Plot, and his website is davidrastokes.com. David, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, my pleasure. And viewers and listeners, if you enjoyed today's show, please hit like. Feel free to leave a comment and subscribe. My social media, you can check out my screenwriting blog. That's maximumz.blog. I'm still on Twitter at maximum_Z, and it's at Pez Screenwriting for Blue Sky and Instagram. And this show is also on social media at Podcast CWL for Twitter and for Blue Sky. You can also check out my Go Ahead and Ask books, the ones on Amazon. Like I said, that's David. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life Podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.